All right. We're finally back to football. I'm so excited. Training camps are starting and fantasy football is not that far away. And I am so pumped. With me to talk about it is Shane Hallam from Draft Countdown and Devy Marketplace. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me back. And yeah, I'm pumped. I'm ready for college football, NFL, fantasy, all this to finally get started here. We're getting close.
We're glowing name brothers where we both have.
Yeah, yeah.
See, I got this because of you. I talked to you last year. It's like, oh my God, that's so cool. And I ordered one for myself. So I love it. But like, yeah, now whatever. I guess there's no more Twitter, so I guess we'll do something else. Um, okay, so what are you seeing? I know it's early, but what are you seeing different this year than in previous years in fantasy football? It seems like I just remember in almost every year, running backs are so important. And now it seems like it's like almost like 50-50. It's like wide receivers are almost just as go just as high as running backs.
Yeah, I think we're kind of getting into that era of the wide receiver, being more important in a lot of ways. I mean, you look at some of the ADP of the first rounds of PPR leagues. We're looking at sometimes eight receivers going in the first round, 8 out of 12, which is wild.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And sometimes even a tight end sneaks in there. So, I think people are scared away by the running back injuries that have hit the past couple years. So many teams are just, sharing backfields. It's tough to really feel like you get an absolute stud. And when you do, he gets too many carries and gets hurt. So why take the risk? And why not shoot for it later? So, I can't remember the last time that we had the clear 101 first pick was not a running back. It's probably been a couple of years where it was clear cut, like you're taking Justin Jefferson, 101. You're not taking a running back there no matter what. It's been a while.
I'm looking at ADP right now, and number one is Justin Jefferson, which is, yeah, crazy. McCaffrey, number two, Jamar Chase, number three, and Austin Eckler, number four, Cooper Kupp, number five. Three of the top five are wide receivers. That's insane. And Travis Kelce, number six.
Right.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. So it's a very different approach, and I think we've seen a lot of people now kind of zagging and say, okay, I'll be the guy that takes the running backs, right? If you don't want to, I'll do it. I think it's a legitimate strategy. But you're definitely taking some risk with that. Stephen McCaffrey, he has his injury history, and Eckler has his. Whereas Jefferson and Chase, you feel pretty good about what you're getting out of those guys. You know what they've done.
They're very consistent. Yeah. Yeah. The other thing with running backs, like you said, there's the injury risk, but there's also the the workload risk. It's kind of a reflection of what's going on with running backs in the NFL and them not getting paid and stuff. It's like, well, why would you pay big money to a running back when you could just get they could draft somebody in the third round or something that does almost as well and is a million times cheaper. But we're seeing that in fantasy football too, where it's like, okay, yeah, you have very rarely you have like the guy. There's always the guy and then one or two other options. It's like running back by committee or something like that. So it's like, how can you invest in one running back?
Well, and then even the guys that you feel good are the guy, you start to wonder, is that team going to start to dip somewhere else? You take a guy like Derrick Henry, who we're used to going top 5 or 6, now going in round 2. He has a lot of tread on the tires. They drafted Tajay Spears in the 4th round. Like, they very easily could take some of his workload off, and he's not worth as high a pick as he was. So I think that lends to some of the fear, the running back environment in the NFL. Or you're staring guys in the face that you're like, this should be a slam dunk. Like Ramondre Stevenson for the Patriots should be a bell cow back, but the Patriots never do that. So, do I take the risk and take him as my RB1 in the 2nd, 3rd round when I know that Bill Belichick's can screw me over there, or just forget about running back for a while, and I'll take those risks later in the draft.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one thing I couldn't believe when I see Ramondre Stevenson so high. in drafts is like, do you not know he's plays for New England? And New England never, you never see like a superstar running back from New England. I don't know how long it's been, maybe since Corey Dillon or something like that. It just doesn't happen.
Right. And I mean, they've been kicking the tires on Kareem Hunt and Leonard Fournette, like
Dalvin Cook.
that. Right. So very easily the Patriots could sign someone else. And now you're in another platoon situation. That can happen. So I think people are worried, or, even when we've had running backs who we felt good about, Kenneth Walker going into his second year in Seattle, or Travis Etienne in Jacksonville, those two teams just drafted a running back in the top 125 of the draft. So, I mean, you're going to use that guy, right? Like, so it becomes difficult, I think, to rely on any one running back at this point.
Where do you stand on drafting quarterbacks early? It seems like the conventional wisdom is, oh, wait, just pick up some quarterback later in the draft. Who cares? They're all the same. I don't know, but I have eyes, and I see Mahomes throwing, 3-4 touchdowns every game, or Josh Allen or Burrow or something like that. It's like, I would rather have the guy that's putting up big numbers every single game. I don't know. Where do you stand on drafting quarterbacks?
I used to be a draft quarterback late guy. Like, I can wait, whatever. I think I'm starting to change my tune a bit. I still think there are good quarterbacks when you get down to QB9, QB10, the Dak Prescotts or Tuas of the world, I think could be really good. But like you said, I think when you start to look at, 6, 7, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, those type of quarterbacks, I think I want one of those players. So, I don't think I'm going to have a lot of Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen that people are drafting, second round. I probably won't do that. But the next tier down, I think, are good enough with high enough upside that I think is a fine balance for not giving up value, but I'm still getting potential elite production with that. And you can kind of vary your risk. I think Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert are super safe with good upside as well. But if you want to take a Justin Fields and hope for that rushing, yardage, rushing quarterbacks are king in fantasy, I think you could do that too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the whole other factor is you don't just have, very rarely do you have that like guy that just stands there and throws a lot. You have your guy that could run a lot too. So we don't know what Justin Fields is going to do passing wise, but he's going to deliver with the running. So very interesting. What about tight ends? It seems like there's 2 or 3 and then the rest are garbage. It's like you got to take it early or you just roll the dice.
I think that's a firm strategy. If you don't get, to me, I kind of see maybe 5 or 6 that I really like. Now, obviously, like Kelsey, Andrews, who you mentioned, are at the top. But TJ Hawkinson from Minnesota really came on at the end of last year. And I think that even the next tier down, George Kittle for the 49ers still is pretty consistent. I really like Darren Waller moving to the Giants is probably their best receiver on that team.
Yeah.
So I think you take a shot on those guys, or take a third chance at Kyle Pitts in Atlanta and hope the talent wins out for once. So hasn't happened, but we're still hoping. No. But I think if you kind of get past Waller, I'd almost rather wait on tight end and really load up. I think we're going to see a lot of waiver wire tight ends that kind of emerge. A lot of teams don't really have one that's even fantasy draftable. The Miami Dolphins this year, someone's going to emerge that can be a spot starter for you. So I don't mind waiting if you miss out on the elite guys. Yeah.
Just see how things shake out. Kyle Pitts. Oh my goodness. Every year with the Kyle Pitts. It's such a polarizing topic. Like every year you're waiting for this. He said, oh, but he has so much talent. It's like, yeah, but he's not delivering. And like, I don't know. Atlanta just seems like a big question mark with a young quarterback. Seems like they're, really leaning into running. Like, what do you think of that whole Atlanta offense?
I'm intrigued by it because it looks so good on paper. And like you said, they drafted Bijan Robinson, the top 10, who, if I'm taking a running back in the first round, back end of the first round, I think I'm taking him. Like, give me the fresh legs, out of college, like, they didn't draft him in the top 10 to sit him on the bench or anything.
Yeah.
So I do think they're going to lean on the run game. But I mean, Desmond Ridder at quarterback is a fantasy sleeper quarterback because he can run. And he's a decent runner too, and has Drake London, has Kyle Pitts. Is it going to be enough to make those two fantasy relevant? I don't know if they pass enough for that, but but I think I want to hope that we see some big games out of those guys. So Atlanta's definitely I look at that division. I think they could be the best team in that division. It's pretty bad, the NFC South. So it could happen.
Possible weak schedule. So yeah. There's a potential there. Aaron Rodgers was the big move this offseason to the Jets. Where do you think he'll be as good as he was in Green Bay? He's old, the new offense. There's a lot of pressure in New York. I don't know. There just seems like a lot of potential for it not going well.
Yeah, he's turning 40 this year, so I think those best days are behind him. Not that he's awful. Like I would rather have him than Mike White and Zach Wilson throwing Jets receivers the ball. But I don't think Rodgers is going to put up these incredible fantasy numbers to be back to a top 5, fantasy quarterback. Really outside of Garrett Wilson, there's a ton there to throw to. I actually like taking shots at like Corey Davis, those kind of guys super late, like last round. But there's not much more to work with. I think they are going to be pretty balanced and run Breece Hall. And so I think Rodgers will be kind of a middling QB2 that you can spot against bad defenses and can do well.
And you just hope Breece Hall is healthy. That's, because it seems like they don't really have a backup there. So they're really relying on him unless they pick up like Dalvin Cook or something like that. So
right. They have been linked to Cook. So it'll be interesting to see if that happens, how that rolls.
Yeah. If I was one of those hold that court running backs, I would just wait until the training camp is over. Like you guys go run around, you do that stuff. I'll sit on my couch and cheer you on, and then join the team when you're done with all that goofy stuff. But
I think it's what a lot of them are doing, and people criticize, no one wants to sign them. Why are they asking for all this money? Like, you got to pay me more if you want me to show up to camp. I'll take less after that's over. Like you said, I think the Leonard Fournette's and Dalvin Cooks of the world, there's no need for them to be at training camp, right? Like, they'll be fine.
And then that's the thing. It's like you're like, well, they need to learn the offense. Not really. Hey, there's a hole there. Go run to it. Yeah, and people do get hurt in training camp. So yeah, if you could skip that, go ahead. The Packers offense, are they just in rebuild mode, or we just don't know what the heck we're going to get from Jordan Love?
We don't. But I like what I saw from Jordan Love last year when he did come in kind of shortly. I didn't think the offense missed a beat, which was surprising to me. I wasn't a Jordan Love guy coming into the draft when he was drafted, but he's had a lot of time to learn that offense and for them to build him up. I think they don't have great weapons. We saw Christian Watson, the receiver they drafted last year, kind of emerged, a lot of touchdowns. He showed up. And they're still going to have Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, I think, running the ball. So yeah, I kind of like the running backs a bit more. I don't mind taking a chance on Jordan Love super late as a backup quarterback. Just see what happens. If he blows up, awesome. You got to steal, and if not, you can cut him. It's not a big deal. But yeah, outside of Watson, I'm not sure there's any receiver there that I really love to draft.
Yeah. You never know. He could be almost as good or just as good as Aaron Rodgers, and they just keep going. So that would be interesting.
Yeah, I remember when Aaron Rodgers was taking over. We were having the same conversation.
That's right.
Far, right? We were like, oh, there's no way he's going to be.
But that was like 20 years ago. I mean, we were on MySpace back then. We didn't have any Twitter accounts.
Yeah, well, there's no X there.
No. In the AFC North, Baltimore, they signed Lamar Jackson, and Lamar Jackson is always really one of the better quarterbacks in fantasy football. But now they're changing their offense to be this more pass-oriented thing. How do you think that's all going to shake out in Baltimore? I mean, how's it going to affect Lamar? How's it going to affect the running backs and these wide receivers they got? Are you high on them?
Not particularly. I mean, I still like Lamar because he's still going to run, and I think Todd Monken, we saw in Georgia this past season with Stetson Bennett, still has that, rushing packages within his system, but he does want to put more in the quarterback's hands. So it makes sense. So I still like Lamar. I like J.K. Dobbins now, kind of 2 years removed from injury to kind of bounce back. I think people were down on him. Yeah, the receivers I still can't quite get a handle on. I still don't feel like the volume is going to be there for Odell Beckham or Zay Flowers or Rashad Bateman. Outside of Mark Andrews, it's like I still don't think that's going to be the case. And Todd Monken's offense runs a lot through the tight end still. So I think it's going to be a very different offense when we see it. Maybe it's slow to start a little bit. But I think fantasy wise, you might not see that much of a difference in terms of pure numbers. I think it's still going to be run oriented, tight end oriented, and they'll let Lamar throw it more, but they have so many options that no one's going to get enough for it to be worthwhile.
Taking a big gamble with OBJ.
Yeah.
It could go well, but there's a big chance it could be a disaster. And it's not like, oh, he didn't really do anything. It's like, oh, he didn't do anything, and he went crazy because they didn't give him the ball or something like that. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously was a move to get Lamar, get the contract done, but if it ends up being the undoing of that offense, then was it really worth it,
I could see them very quickly saying, this isn't going to work out. Just get out of here. I don't care if we paid you a bunch of money. We'll just stay home or something. Like,
here, take the money.
I mean, yeah, I'm like, how many teams is OBJ going to do this on? It's like, is he just going to go to every team and and implode? Big question in Cleveland. I see people really high on Deshaun Watson. I don't know. I think that's just a big unknown. He came back last year, and I know the circumstances were weird, but he didn't look that great. But people are really high on him. How do you think that's going to shake out in the Cleveland offense?
I don't think it's going to end well. I mean, when's the last time we saw Deshaun Watson be good? Like, it's been 3 years. Even even toward the end of his Houston, the last games he was playing in Houston, he was throwing a lot of interceptions. Like, it wasn't super great. It's very possible he's just not as good as he was.
Yeah.
And then what do we have? I think he's competent enough, and the offense is competent enough to have some fantasy relevancy. Obviously, Nick Chubb's going to do well. I'm staying away from Watson at his value. I'd much rather take a Dak Prescott or take Tua or even Daniel Jones. But I do like Elijah Moore, who they traded for there. I think he's a really good fit for the offense. I think he's a nice sleeper. So I've targeted him a little bit. But yeah, I don't think the Browns offense is going to turn into this top 7 offense anytime soon, like they're hoping for.
I wonder if they're still going to run a lot. I wonder how that's all going to work. It's like, do you make Deshaun Watson the focal point of the offense, or do you keep it as Nick Chubb?
I mean, I wouldn't take the ball out of Nick Chubb's hands. He's too good.
Seriously, yeah.
You have the offensive line for it. Why mess with what works?
Right.
But, it is Cleveland. I've done pretty well most of my fantasy career for the past 20 years. Not drafting Cleveland Browns has generally worked out for me, so I'll stick to it.
I just figured it out. I think the owner of the Cleveland Browns is running Twitter. I think that might be. I mean, either Elon Musk is running the Browns, or the Cleveland owner is running Twitter, because that's some high level mismanagement, right? And then with the Steelers, the talk in Pittsburgh is it's almost like a civil war. What do we do about Kenny Pickett? Is he going to be good? Is he going to be bad? Obviously, last year he was a rookie, didn't put up good numbers, but what do you expect this year from Kenny Pickett?
I think he'll be fine. I think he'll take a step forward. I don't think Kenny Pickett is ever going to be a fantasy stud by any means. I think he's going to be like we've seen from the Steelers, and Big Ben for a number of years, even early, was, kind of run the offense and win games.
Game manager.
Yeah, not, you're not there to put up big numbers. You're there to score points, right? And I think we saw what Kenny Pickett could do in the clutch. I like having him in super flex leagues. I think he's a fine kind of bench quarterback to have. And if you need him in a pinch or a bye week, I don't think it's the worst thing. But ultimately, honestly, for the Steelers offense, I think Najee Harris is the one who's underrated. I think he's the one that's, because of the injury last year, didn't play as well fantasy wise as people expected. I don't know. You can disagree with me, Joey, because I think being in Pittsburgh, he's going to get the volume. All the fantasy guys are talking up Jaylen Warren, and they want Jaylen Warren to get, a bunch of carries and split with Najee Harris. And I'm like, it's not going to happen here. That's not how it works.
I agree. People think it's going to be like 50-50. It's probably going to be more like 70-30 or 60-40. Najee getting most of the carries. I think they want everything they've done this offseason is bolster the offensive line. They drafted that big tight end from Georgia that's basically another offensive lineman. Everything has been geared toward bolstering, like strengthening the run game, not having Kenny Pickett do too much. That it's all set up for Najee Harris having a big year. We'll see. Warren is good, but I think they're all in on Najee Harris. So I'm not buying this 50-50 stuff, or that Jaylen Warren is going to take all of his thunder.
Yeah. So just something, I think as Steelers fans out there to exploit. You might be able to get Najee a little later than you think.
So it doesn't sound like Steelers wide receivers are even worth getting. Maybe Deontay Johnson. I don't know. There's no way he could go another season without getting a touchdown.
Right. Yeah. That's the only reason I like Deontay Johnson, because he's got to score more fantasy points than he did last year. It's got to happen. He's got to score touchdowns. That was, looking at NFL history, that was such a fluke.
Only one way to go.
Yeah. So I don't mind him, though. There's a lot of receivers kind of in his range that I like as well. So I think it's tough to pull that trigger. But yeah, I like Deontay Johnson. I probably would pass this year on George Pickens. I think he's going too high for it's probably not going to be a consistent every game, you can start him kind of deal. And then Pat Freiermuth is kind of in that tight end dead zone of he's not the elite guys, but he's not, but he's still costs a little too much to me to draft.
Pickens is a perfect player that you get. You don't play him all the time. The times you do play him, he does nothing. And the times you bench him, he goes off.
Exactly.
That
right?
perfect player that just frustrates the heck out of you.
We love those.
There are so many. There's a few certainties, but so many questions. Even the Chiefs, who are as stable as heck. Obviously you have Mahomes, you have Kelsey, but then they changed their wide receivers. I don't know. I don't know. Their running back is almost never relevant, or maybe they are. What are you expecting from the Chiefs offense?
It's tough because I think last year we saw how the Chiefs offense outside of Mahomes and Kelsey can not give you anything in fantasy, and they could still score a ton of points. The offense, they can score points, but no one's helping you. I think it's going to be similar this year. Some people like Kadarius Toney. He's already hurt. So I don't know. I probably would invest highly in him. And then it's there's a whole bevy of guys outside of that. Do you take a chance on Sky Moore in year two? Maybe he finally emerges there, but they drafted some guys, Rashee Rice. It's just, I don't know. I'm kind of passing. I do think running back is the one area where Isaiah Pacheco kind of established himself last year, especially in the playoffs as the guy. I think we'll still see some Clyde Edwards-Helaire sprinkled in and little Jerick McKinnon, but I think Pacheco is going late enough that he's worth a shot because he's fast. He can break some of those big runs. They used him in the passing game a bit. So it's probably worth a shot maybe as, your top bench running back or even your RB3 on your team. And but maybe one of my favorite Chiefs to draft in the last round is Deneric Prince. He's an undrafted running back they got out of Tulsa. He has the highest speed score in the class, like Pacheco did the year before. So he's a big,
Mm.
fast receiving back. He's been actually doing a lot of receiving out of the backfield. So, if he does nothing or ends up on the practice squad, you cut him. And if he somehow, an injury happens, I think Derek Prince might be the second best running back on that team.
Interesting. On the Colts, Jonathan Taylor is going in the top 10, but then such a big question mark, Anthony Richardson. Is it just a matter of, because he's going to run, is he almost going to be like Justin Fields 2.0, where even if he can't even pass, it doesn't matter because you have, him running, and you hope that doesn't take away too much from Jonathan Taylor?
Yeah, that's what makes Anthony Richardson. He's just going to be fantasy relevant no matter what, as long as he's playing. I think it's the one fear is potentially they start Gardner Minshew and really bring Richardson along slowly. Seems like a real possibility. So I think before, drafting Anthony Richardson too high, maybe pump the brakes, like you might be without him for a while. Might be better to wait for year 2. But if he's starting for the Colts, that gets announced, then yeah, I'm in. I think he's going to has a pretty high floor because he's going to run, and the ceiling also gets high if he can run for some touchdowns. But that size and the rushing ability, that just wins in fantasy.
Yeah. Same thing in Carolina and Houston. You got rookie quarterbacks. I don't know. To me, I would just stay away from both of those teams together. I mean, it just seems like just way too volatile.
I do like both Bryce Young and CJ Stroud as players. As fantasy players, I think it's a little bit harder. Bryce Young, I like a little bit more because he does have some rushing upside that we saw. I think he is pretty athletic, so you might get a little bit of that in Frank Reich's offense, but there's not a ton around those guys to feel good that they're going to be these sky-high offenses. So I don't mind taking if you draft Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, taking Bryce Young, CJ Stroud in the second to last round, just get them on your bench, see what happens. If they blow up, great. If not, you can cut them. But yeah, I mean, those offenses in general, outside of maybe, Dameon Pierce and Miles Sanders, I don't know if I invest too much in either one.
Yeah. On the Raiders, Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs are still going high, but they have a new quarterback, and Josh Jacobs, who knows when he's going to show up. Is Devontae Adams kind of quarterback proof? Did we see that last year? That doesn't matter. He's just that good.
I think he is to an extent. I mean, I get a little bit worried now with no Darren Waller. There's not much else there. In terms of receiving options. If I'm a defense, I mean, I'm double teaming Devontae Adams all day. Go ahead and beat me with someone else.
Right.
That's fine, especially if Josh Jacobs doesn't show up. So I'm a little bit scared of Adams compared to some, I think I'd rather have Garrett Wilson or AJ Brown or CeeDee Lamb. But round 2, if he falls a little bit, I think there is such a high floor, like Devontae Adams is going to score his, that it's fine to invest in.
Yeah. There is so much hype over the Detroit Lions in real football, but even in fantasy football too. Are you buying that the Lions are? I mean, they did perform pretty high in fantasy last year. Do you think they're worth like a Amon St. Brown and their running back?
Yeah, I think it is a worthwhile offense to invest in. I think Jared Goff is pretty underrated. If you do wait on quarterback till super late, like he performed as a QB1 for a handful of games last year. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think, will keep his role. Jameson Williams is suspended for a bit for gambling at the team facility, but he'll be back and maybe has some deep shots. But yeah, the running backs are interesting because they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs in the top 12. So I think he's going to get a lot of receptions. Maybe he's kind of their slot receiver in a way. And then they brought in David Montgomery, who we saw what happened with Jamal Williams last year. Yeah. Scored a ton of touchdowns. There's no reason to think David Montgomery's not going to have that role, and he's decently cheap. So yeah, I actually think value wise, it's a better offense than I expected it to be.
With the Bears, Justin Fields only has, I mean, he was amazing running last year. Is this just just an expectation that he's going to be even better this year? Maybe add a little bit of passing.
Yeah, I think we're gonna see definitely that step forward. I think when you get the passing game mixed in and improving, that we're gonna see some increased numbers there as well. I think the offense as a whole has gotten better, and so to me, that's something I look for. You know, as the offense gotten better, then I can give a bump to, especially to some of these quarterbacks. Can give a bump to them.
Oh, so many questions. It's going to be so interesting to see how this all plays on in training camp. And even in training camp, we're not going to get all the answers. So it's going to be so fascinating to see. But finally it's back. It's no fair. It's no fair that we have to wait all these months to get real football.
Yeah, I know. It's always this long wait, and then or just opening the floodgates here and waiting for it to come. I mean,
And then we get flooded. Then there's too much coming. Where can people find you and following you and get your work?
Yeah, you can follow me at draftcountdown.com. Focus on the NFL draft over there. We'll be relaunching here in a couple weeks. But I also do a fantasy podcast, Devy Marketplace. So you can get that wherever you get your podcasts.
And Shane P. Hallam on Twitter, whatever they're calling it today.
Put up the X.
Yeah. I mean, in Pittsburgh, there's a radio station called 105.9 The X. Like, did they are you Twitter now? I was like, I don't know.
Are you Twitter now?
Who knows? Well, yeah. Well, if it's still up this week, we're still on whatever it's called. So, hey, thanks so much. Probably bug you in a month from now to see how things go. But thanks so much for the time.
No, thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Joe.
All right. See you.